What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 2 Cash Game Review, where I will go over my primary main slate lineup on DraftKings, discuss the ups and downs from the previous week. We'll go over results, process, mistakes made, the right things done, and there's not going to be too much of things done right. In this recap, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This was the stone worst DFS performance, that I've had in cash games ever. Period. Since I've been taking DFS, seriously, it was just terrible. And I'll get into why in a moment. But if you enjoy the content that you find on this channel, you can subscribe on YouTube. I do a weekly video previewing cash games on Thursdays for the week that's upcoming. You can subscribe to that. I also have a podcast called the DFS Dose. I do it with two other guys. You can find that on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And then finally, you can follow me on Twitter. My @ is on the screen at Ben Hover. Now let's get right into this cash lineup. One of the reasons that this loss is so hard to deal with, in my opinion, is because it's mostly variance based. If the decisions that I made were directly responsible, and they are to an extent, but I think that if the decisions I made were more directly responsible, if I was making shaky plays that went bad, at least that I could handle because that's on me. But when things like, your quarterback gets injured and is out, midway through the second quarter and leaves you with 3 points, 75 yards passing. Yes, I started Ben Roethlisberger in cash. That's really hard to come back from, and you just kind of feel like, the whole week is done very early in the day, and it's just, it's tough to deal with. So this is the cash line. I'll put it on the screen here. Went Big Ben to Juju in cash. Obviously, did not work out. We're hearing this morning that Ben Roethlisberger is out for the season. Apparently teammates knew about this elbow injury. It was something he was concerned about coming into the week. It was not reported on anywhere that I was able to find. So, it just looks like it was something that he was holding, pretty tight to the chest, and now it's looking like it could be something that, puts his career in jeopardy. But we'll find out about that later. In terms of this cash lineup, so Austin Eckler, one of the few things that worked out for me on the slate, one of the highest owned players in cash, 24.3 points. He was just massively underpriced for the role that he has without Melvin Gordon on the team. He ended up fumbling at the 1 yard line, which would have, put him at a 30-point day. He also had a longer touchdown, I think, on that same drive called back. So Austin Eckler put up 24.3 points without some things breaking his way. He was one of the two players who I considered a stone lock for the slate, along with Alvin Kamara, who we'll get to at the end here. But, moving on, John Brown and Evan Ingram. John Brown, I took a risk on here. I thought that it would get a little bit of exposure to Josh Allen's production. He had 10 targets in week 1 this week, had 7 receptions on 72 yards, 14.2, just shy of 3xing. But, I'm not mad at that performance from a guy I paid 5.2 for. Had a decent game. Evan Ingram, one of the linchpins, I think, in this lineup. A lot of the people out there played Darren Waller. He was cheaper, 3.3. Now, what I said on the podcast this week was that, Evan Ingram's downside was 8 targets, and you would be disappointed if you got that, and that's exactly what happened. He had 8 targets, 6 receptions for 48 yards. Waller also had 6 receptions and only 7 targets, and that's what I talked about, and that's why I played Evan Ingram. Despite the value that Waller gave to your lineup, right, Evan Ingram's floor ceiling combo is much higher. Now, it happened that we got an Evan Ingram floor game. But yeah, that was always part of the range of outcomes. I'm always a little bit more willing to bank on upside in cash games, and it bit me here. Waller did outscore him just barely, but again, Waller did not even get up to 8 targets. And what I said on the podcast, Evan Ingram, 8 targets would be a disappointment. Waller, 8 targets would be, a great result. So, to me, that's what really differentiated the two of them and why I went Evan Ingram in the end. Ultimately, he was blocking a ton in this game because the Bills were getting such good pressure on Eli Manning, who should not be starting anymore and, likely won't be for much longer, despite what the Giants coaches are saying. So, now let's get into, the real meat of this lineup that is terrible. So, I do want to be clear here. Malcolm Brown and Mecole Hardman were not part of my original cash lineup. Originally, I had Josh Jacobs and Tyrell Williams in those two spots respectively. I was absolutely buried going into 4 p.m. And I predicted Josh Jacobs to be the highest owned player on the slate. He actually wasn't. He was only about 44% owned if you looked in tournaments, not tournaments, but, large field double ups like, the $25 large field. Both of those, he was about 44%. Tyrell was about 65%. And so, on the surface, the pivots I made, I think, were the right choice. I was debating between trying to get Travis Kelce instead of Alvin Kamara and maybe get up to Cooper Kupp from Mecole Hardman. Maybe Jalen Richard was in play as a pivot off of Jacobs, but I didn't end up going there. Now, ultimately, Josh Jacobs was a player that I did not want to play all week. Talked about it on the podcast. I wanted to find a way off of him. I just didn't think there was one. I was projecting him to be about 75% owned in these large field double ups and across cash games. And he is a player to me who we didn't really know if he would get any pass game usage. My lean was no, because this team likes Jalen Richard. And that's exactly what happened. When game script did not favor the Raiders in this game, which I think was pretty predictable, he only ended with 12 carries, 99 yards rushing, and no receptions. So I think that Josh Jacobs was a good fade. Now, was playing Malcolm Brown instead of him a smart play? The thing is obviously, no, it's not optimal. Right? It's not optimal. But, a late field desperation, a late game desperation pivot never is going to be. Right? So, yes, Brown had one reception for 10 yards, only 37 yards rushing. There were reports at the start of the day from Ian Rappaport that he was going to be the goal line back. Turns out that Gurley was still playing a ton inside the red zone. So, I don't know. I mean, Ian Rappaport, up and down reporting. It is what it is. The thing that tilted me the most throughout this day was when Mecole Hardman had a 72-yard touchdown called back. That to me was like just icing on the cake of what had been an overall terrible day in every way, shape, and form. That 72-yard touchdown, when you incorporate the reception, the yardage, the 100-yard bonus it would have given him, and the touchdown, that was a 17.2 point swing off of one play, off of one holding call by some bum on the Chiefs. Just terrible. Absolutely terrible. I was actually laughing about it when it happened because I'm like, could anything more go wrong in this week? And then it did, and I was just like, okay. But it is what it is. It happens, The thing you have to do, I think, is just bounce back, right? We're on to the next week after this. It sucks. I was kind of dreading doing this video, but to be honest, it's kind of therapeutic. It's like putting a nail in the coffin in a terrible week, and we're just going to move on, bounce back, go just as hard at next week. The one other thing I should talk about here is Alvin Kamara. And again, like, it just comes down to variance, because some of these plays, maybe John Brown was somewhat questionable. I don't really know. Josh Jacobs, I'm kind of disappointed with myself that I was going to play him had the rest of this lineup worked out, because I knew he was a good fade, and I was just kind of going for the block, which is something that I've wanted to do less this year in cash, and I just didn't really have the stones to do it this week. Ended up doing it out of desperation, and it failed me still. But Alvin Kamara here, only 7 points. That is wildly low for him. And when you look at this lineup as a whole, Juju Smith-Schuster and Alvin Kamara, two players who both had their quarterbacks get injured and drastically change their outcomes, in my opinion. The two highest priced players that I spent up for in this lineup. It's tough to see, but it happens. I'm actually kind of glad that it all happened at once. Maybe next week I'll have some positive variance break my way, but it was just a tough week in every regard. 2 touchdowns in this individual lineup called back. That one by Hardman was just broke me in terms of having any type of ability to salvage the week. Overall, if you look at these cash games, the line was about 133 to 135, not very high. I think everybody got bit. Juju Smith-Schuster was pretty popular. Kamara, obviously very popular. Two guys that really did not pan out for anybody. So yeah, if the cash line, like I said, in the 130s, and for me, posted 104.5 when it was all said and done. As you can see, I won 6.7% of my head-to-heads, a career low for me. 0 out of my 11 double ups. The ROI was negative 91.25%. Just absolutely abysmal. But we are going to bounce back next week. Going to go just as hard. And yeah, Texans D to me was an obvious play. I'm barely going to touch on that one. So if you played Patriots, you're the GOAT. And congratulations to you. But yeah, that's really it, guys. Sorry if it felt like I was rushing through this one. I just kind of wanted to, get this off of my chest and then move on. It was a little bit ranty at times, I think, but, it is what it is. If you guys have any questions, you can obviously hit me up on Twitter if you want to discuss things. If you guys had a terrible week and you want to, share in our misery, be more than happy to do that with you, at Ben Hover on Twitter. Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I will have a better, result when we come in next week. Thank you.